Are you ready?
I'm ready. Do a hair check.
Yeah.
Belgrade Beat, the pulse of the city.
Hey folks, and welcome to Belgrade Beat. My name is Eric, and I'm sitting here with Katarina, who is somebody who contacted me on the internet a few days ago and said basically, I like your channel. I just came back from living in Serbia again after more than a decade or something like that, living in Lebanon. And I said, that sounds like a story, because if it was I just spent a decade living in Canada, I would probably know everything about that. Or Australia, I could probably guess. But Lebanon, I thought that's a story. Let's see how being back in Belgrade compares with living in Lebanon. And she wanted to ask me some questions too. So it's all good on Belgrade Beat because, I just like having a chat with interesting people all the time. So Katarina, welcome to Belgrade Beat.
Thank you. It's good to be back in Belgrade. The last time I lived here was 16 years ago.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
And what are your memories from 16 years ago? That would have been 2002.
Yeah, so I look young, but I was about 13 at the time.
Okay.
So a teenager in Belgrade. I went to Serbian school for a year up on Banama Brdo, Miloš Crnjanski. So a lot of good memories. It was good to just be fully immersed in Belgrade culture, just being in the local Serbian school and everything. So the city looks different. It feels a little bit more vibrant. There's more diverse than when I remember back in the day.
Yeah.
So it's always nice to go back and revisit a place for a second time, not feeling like a complete stranger. Usually when I moved to a place like I did Lebanon, I knew next to nothing about it. So
really? Okay, so you were living here and you were born in the United States, did I get that right?
I was born in the States. I left when I was just 6 weeks old. I moved with my parents to Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. So we were there for 6 years.
What kind of profession did your parents have that facilitated all of this travel?
Yeah, this is the key question, I guess. My dad was a diplomat.
Mm-hmm. For which country?
He was an American diplomat.
Okay.
My mom's British. So we were in Bulgaria for a while. I moved to Croatia, actually, when I was 9. So I went to Croatian school before Serbian school. So that's where I became familiar sort of with the language.
Yeah.
Then came here as a teenager, and life took on like a different story since then. But so I associate my childhood actually with this region.
Okay.
Even though I speak the languages, but I'm American. My name's Katarina.
Yeah.
So
why did they give you that name if you're American?
I feel like they probably already knew that I was destined to come back here.
So you feel the Balkans in your memory, in your, maybe not your blood. I don't know. Where do you draw your ancestry from? I mean, you look Balkan enough to me. I mean, I've got the blonde mustache, so that sort of rules me out in some way.
That's a compliment because the people here are beautiful.
Yeah.
But American, British, completely. I mean, my mom's, my grandparents, her parents.
Protestant, Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, I mean,
as we call in Canada, WASP.
Yeah. Kind of a WASP.
Okay.
But yeah, it's always interesting. I think like childhood gives you your formative experience and outlook on the world. So I never really identified as being American until I went back when I was older, and I kind of had a reverse culture shock because this is where I really felt more rooted.
Oh wow. Yeah.
This is where I went to school.
What is it? I mean, is it just the natural way that people express themselves here? Is it the food? Is it the language? Is it the...
I just always felt I had a sense of family and community here. I think it was, there's sort of like an openness to the way that people express, the way that they accept, the way that, I don't know, I felt a lot of the time in the States that I get questions.
And the fake smile
look at the camera or the fake smile thing. Or just there's a bit more of a distance. I felt here just immediately sort of more of a connection and a warmth. I never felt any type of hostility. There was always an openness of heart. And I think people who have been through a lot, and I found this especially in like Lebanon, like here, is that people who have really experienced a lot of trauma or difficulty in life tend to be sort of very open and helpful and wanting to give everything that they have, even if it's little. So I always found that I had solid ground here. So which is why like I find myself being pulled back to the Balkans.
Okay, so you have this American background, childhood in the Balkans, and You moved to Lebanon at how old were you? Sorry.
I think, when was the first time I moved to Lebanon? About 3 years ago. So I was probably like 25.
Okay, where did you live in the meantime between?
I spent 5 years in New York.
Yeah.
I got into journalism when I was in New York, and I was working on sort of a media startup called Syria Deeply. And the idea behind that was to have a single platform just delivering news from Syria, from Syrians themselves. And it was a way to actually give Syrian people a chance to kind of tell their stories, and it wasn't as media or headline driven. And it resonated with me because I feel like there's big misconceptions about the Middle East, just like there's misconceptions about Serbia and the Balkans, and that comes from lack of information. So I got into writing a lot about Syria, and that sort of propelled me to go to Lebanon, because I've always been a person who feels that you actually need to immerse yourself and be in the place instead of just talking about it from, an outside perspective, which is really why I went to Serbian school and Croatian school.
Okay, so if I were to tell somebody, like a friend in Canada, for example, that Serbia is really great because people are really friendly and the food's great and everything just feels good here, how would you describe Lebanon? To break the misconceptions of the Middle East, and how is it there? I mean, how?
Well, my heart is in Lebanon.
Okay.
As it is here. I mean, it's the two places for me that I think some people travel to places in their life and it clicks with them. You probably had that when you came to Serbia. It feels like you're always kind of supposed to be there. You naturally sort of feel like a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I felt in Lebanon. I found that the people they have a complicated history, yes, and that's not a negative thing whatsoever. I think the problem is there's a difficulty in conveying that complexity, so it lends itself to stereotypes and whatnot. But I think there's a very rich cultural history there. I mean, especially there, the arts is very much like alive. I think in times of struggle and resilience, a lot of like artistic and creative movements are born in music and in art, and I found that was especially true in Lebanon. And it's also, I mean, everyone says it, and I don't want to lend myself to that stereotype, but it is a great place to go out. I found that within a couple of weeks, I already knew my way around. I knew people. There was not any difficulty meeting anyone.
Okay, so the typical view of Arab Middle Eastern countries, at least in the West, is that they're religious dictatorships, women are oppressed, that you can't have any fun, and all that stuff. How is that? How would you break that stereotype with Lebanon?
I mean, I think that in any country around the world, you see this in the United States right now. There's very conservative, there's very radical points of view, both in the United States that I completely disagree with. And as an American, especially with what's going on with Trump right now, I find it very difficult being abroad, representing the United States with that being the point of view about America, and also being abroad and seeing the American foreign policy abroad, which in large parts of the world has been a disaster. So I want people to afford me the benefit of the doubt as an American, and I think it's the same like in Lebanon and in other parts of the Middle East.
And Serbia.
And Serbia, they all have elements of those sort of extreme points of view. Does it mean that the masses agree to that? No. And I also really resent the idea that a religion makes you behave a certain way. It's the way, like anything, any violent act, it's the person behind it, it's the politics, it's the ideology behind it. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone adheres to the same type of...
So is Lebanon a secular country, or is it more of a religious government?
I mean, that's a hard... I mean, secular is a strange word. I mean, there's a lot of diversity in religion, like there is,
lots of Christians,
like for example,
well,
in Bosnian Christians, Muslims, Shia, Sunni, Druze. There's a lot of different religions. The government is formed based off of that, sort of like in Bosnia. But I mean, I find that it's an overly simplistic way to describe the way that things function there. But of course, there was a civil war there. People do associate with certain religions, some more than others. But I found, like, as a whole, I mean, of course, we're foreigners, right? When we're in a country, we have the luxury of being inside and out, where we don't have to deal with all of the the BS or the background or the history, you know? So we have to we have to be honest with ourselves that we're just really sapping up what we think is best. And oftentimes you probably hear this when you're here, like I heard in Lebanon, what are you doing here? We're trying to get out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, lots of people want to get out of Serbia, but they don't know why I don't live in Canada anymore. They could, I could probably never understand. After listening to these stories for years, I can understand how hopeless living here is if you're a Serbian person competing on the Serbian job market for Serbian salaries with Serbian problems and Serbian family, and everybody in your family has the same sorts of problems, and it's all economic and the political sort of side of the whole way that everything here functions, and the hangover from the socialist times, plus the institutions which are from the socialist times crumbling. And I will never understand what it's like to live in that system. I only get sort of tastes of it, but I don't have to swallow it every day, is kind of how I feel. When I go to Poreska uprava, the tax office, it's like, okay, well, this
no one likes the tax office, but in general,
or even the police station to register for a visa or anything like that. You get this sort of feeling of this, or even when you go into a bank to withdraw some money, and the way that the people in the bank sort of have this, I don't want to be here, look on their faces all the time, and there's none of that. But I'm not immersed in that. I've done my best to build a bubble around myself, which is actual progress. And that all depends on, the internet and the ability to live a life with it, which is not based on the local reality, which us expats find particularly accessible to ourselves, right?
And I also.
So what did you do there? Did you? You went to university, right?
In Lebanon or in the States?
Which?
The States. Well, no, I went to university in the States.
What did you study?
International affairs, which
I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised.
But at this point, I loved my university experience. It's a great university, but I would have probably now, in hindsight, not studied that.
I studied politics for 1 year.
Yeah, and now I find myself retreating further and further away from it. I think it's good to have a general sense of what's going on politically.
So what do you want to do? What's your passion?
Bridging, connecting people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really at the heart of it. I do think, especially if
between cultures, maybe.
Yeah, definitely between cultures. I mean, I think.
But not governments, people, right?
No, not governments, not politics. Politics aside, always. I mean, I'm tired of just looking at things through a political angle. I mean, I think the way that the world is going right now, I think we're seeing kind of a failure of systems. We're seeing it everywhere. Everyone's feeling a bit sort of an anxiety of what's to come next. And I feel that within that there's a generation, especially of kids or people our age, who are always looking things that transcend politics, that transcend borders, that transcend religion. And I think we all feel that sort of passionately. And I do think, especially if you're at a standpoint where you've been able to travel and you have that luxurious sort of perspective and a network and people, that you do have an obligation to sort of connect people. And I've just seen the most amazing artists and musicians in Lebanon and Syria, Palestine, and the States, people here. And I just think that there's a lot to benefit from some sort of cultural exchange and dialogue, not only because when you actually have a real connection with people, it opens up your eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something that you can read in a book. And I think that those types of exchanges have really been a luxury that I've been able to enjoy, that if I could afford to someone else, I think that would be a lot to benefit from.
That's actually very close to what I'm doing with my life and where my passion is at.
Oh.
I mean, I have my band, which is the biggest passion in my life, called Eric and the Worldly Savages. And the name Worldly Savages comes from this idea of being a citizen of the world, but still tapping into that raw passion of being a human beast and a human sort of animal, some sort of, but also looking in the context of the world. And this company that I started, Supportive Venture, finds people jobs that they can work from wherever they want over the internet. So those two things over my life are coming together into this message, and Belgrade Beat is the same thing, where I'm reaching out to the world to sort of challenge people who are ready to have that chance to go beyond their cultural boundaries and become more international and more open-minded to different cultures, different ways of thinking, and sort of escape this sort of, for lack of a better term, and to sort of dramatize it, brainwashing that occurs in any culture in the world. If you stay in one place and for too long and get too indoctrinated to one sort of subset of humanity and human ideology or something. You see it everywhere. Every country in this world has its own sort of mainstream thinking, and that you're supposed to fit in, or, at best, it would have, a sort of left-wing and a right-wing sort of alternative of that mainstream narrative of the culture.
Which, I think duality's black and white way of seeing things are always a mistake to begin with. And I think the way things are going now, people are really being presented with sort of like the options of good or bad, left or right. And I think that like through experience in life, you always realize it's a bit more complicated.
Yeah, I almost feel like politics in general, like left-wing, right-wing, are just sort of really, really distractions for humanity to be distracted on while businesses continue to grow and rule the world, actually. So
big corporate businesses.
Yeah, corporate businesses and stuff like that. And so what I do is I play with that, corporate world and stuff. I can, but my business is, we all work online, the people I work with, and we're based in many different countries. We've got 9 different countries represented now.
Wow.
It's just like, we're happy to provide value in the world over the internet, but we want to be in a place like Belgrade. We want to be like in a place like, in a couple weeks I'm going to Chiang Mai, Thailand for my second trip there. Amazing. Because that's a place where lots of people really find a similar sort of authenticity.
Yeah.
Belgrade.
That's a good word. Authenticity.
Authenticity. Authenticity. Is that what drew you back? The authenticity of this place.
That's a great word.
Why here, not Croatia? Why here, not the other places you?
Well, my time in sort of Lebanon had come to an end, and for now, it's a place that like I will always hold dear. But I found that I felt with people in Beirut, they were always saying Belgrade, and in Belgrade people say, oh, Beirut, I've heard a lot about it. So I felt like if I wanted to kind of bridge that divide and be in a place that still kind of excited me and in its chaotic and beautiful and real human way, Belgrade had that. I come from, I see how like in your life you found your intersection between business and music. I come from a media background.
Okay.
More in storytelling. And I just found that I gravitated more towards Belgrade than I did Croatia. Croatia is a beautiful place, and I love going to visit. My parents actually live in Croatia, not here.
Okay.
So I'm always somewhat in the region. But I just feel that in the next couple years, more and more people are going to be attracted to coming to Belgrade.
This is like, I feel
like this is a place that people are going to realize the potential of. When I lived here when I was 12 or 13, I brought some of my friends from the States over, which was a great experience for them. We still, talk about it occasionally. But for the most part, it was really hard to get people over here.
It still is, trust me.
And I want that to change, and I do think that's going to change in the next couple of years. And I do think it's opening up, and I love that. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I
want to be part of that wave.
Well, we have this sort of neutral, no man's land feel to the place still, whereas all these countries. Croatia's joined the European Union. They're on that side of the world. But Serbia, for example, last year, I don't know if you heard this story, but they removed visas for China, Iran, India, and Indonesia, aka 41% of the world's population. So you're going to see some more people coming by here. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about your impressions of Belgrade today and how it feels to be back here and what most inspires you.
Anything that opens up their eyes more wide. Anything that lets them touch the other side. Take me away from myself. Take me away from myself. Take me away from myself. Take me away from myself.
And we're back, folks, with Katarina, and talking about why, as an American who traveled around as a child and teenager living in the States, in Lebanon, and in Serbia in her formative years, she has decided to come back to Belgrade, Serbia to live. How does it feel now that you're back?
It feels good. It kind of feels like I came back home in this strange way, in that I haven't lived here for 17 years, but it's always been a part of my life. I used to come back and visit a lot. Always had a lot of Serbian friends in New York, some in Lebanon. So it's always been a big part of my life anyways. But it is, the city still is new. So it's this weird, I'm used to going to a place when it's completely new and foreign, and it doesn't feel that way at all, especially...
Yeah.
Am I talking?
Yeah, it's good.
Especially like that now I'm in a place where I have the language skill. That was a challenge for me in Lebanon with Arabic.
Oh, yeah, did you learn some Arabic?
Nothing that I'm proud of. No, and really like the language is so beautiful and so sort of poetic. It's a shame I don't know it, but so it's good. It's good.
Na srpskom ti možeš sve. Znači
Da, na srpskom mislim, išla sam u srpsku školu godinu dana, nije mi to teško, to mi, mislim, to mi dođe ovako.
Because lots of foreigners move here and they don't learn Serbian as well.
Yeah, I mean, for this I'm really grateful for my parents. They gave me the option when I was a kid of American or Serbian school or American Croatian school, and I think I was 9. I mean, you're, what do they say? Your brain is like a sponge. So that was the best thing they did for me, I think. It just transformed my experience here, and it just opens your mind up. So, yeah, that's sort of the easiest part about being back. It doesn't feel foreign in that sense at all. But I am also noticing that the city has changed. I mean, I was here in, 2001,
Okay, so you flew in January.
Yeah.
What was your first impression? What was it like? What were you expecting? You hadn't been here for 12 years at all.
No, I had been back and forth every couple years for a week or two.
So it wasn't a huge shock. You weren't hoping for this place that didn't exist anymore, but
no, I was always. I mean,
So did you find a place to live? These are actually the details. Like on my channel, the most popular is the. Moving to Serbia, how to find an apartment, how to stuff So how was that, finding an apartment? Where did you settle down?
Yeah, so, I have been coming back because I'm a kuma here to someone, which anyone who knows the word kuma. So they've been great to me. I've always been able to stay there. So I didn't have the anxiety of having to stay too long. I mean, I've stayed in Airbnbs here as well, but I've had places to stay, which also makes a big difference because I didn't feel the kind of rush one would feel in finding an apartment. I could ease into it. Also, I kind of decided on to either Vračar or Dorčol or those types of names, which I feel like it might be a stereotype for foreigners. There always is those two neighborhoods as a foreigner abroad.
There's a really, really good reason, and that's because we want to live an international life.
Yeah.
I've lived in the suburbs here. I made a video about it the other day. I've lived in the suburbs here, and it's just not the same. I don't want to sit on a bus for half an hour. And, you have this life in the center where you have nice cafes, nice restaurants all around you. You don't go to people; they come to you. That sort of thing. It's much better.
It's more accessible. I just thought for now in the transition period where I'm getting myself going, my boyfriend's coming from Lebanon in a month, and I just wanted us to be somewhere very central.
You want to live in the center, yeah.
But I don't mind, that's something, you readjust your expectations over time. But for now, for kind of what I need, I really am feel like I'm in the research investigative phase of moving back to a place of I want to see where the vibe is, where people are, where they're hanging out, what people are into and stuff. So that was part of the reason of Dorčol or Vračar. I was lucky, one of my friends from when I was a kid here is a real estate agent. So we looked at listings, me and my boyfriend. It was just one of those feelings that I'm learning to trust my intuition when you just see something or feel something, especially, sometimes with real estate, it's hard to find a place that you just need to jump on it.
Yeah, and these agents are real hustlers. They want to show you 5 places in one day, and then they want, so which one are you going to choose?
No, we were just we want to look at this one, and that was the one we ended up taking. So, I mean, that's not by any means good advice, because it's probably not what happens to everyone, but I would say that,
Dorčol or Vračar, which one did it?
I'm in Dorčol, but lower Dorčol, lower, yeah, lower down.
By the river?
By the river, yeah.
Okay.
Which is fine.
Closer to the Piazza or Kalemegdan?
Closer to Kalemegdan.
Okay.
Which,
I lived in that neighborhood for 2 years, so...
I'm a city girl, but I love nature. We just spent the week in Mokra Gora. If I can have a chance to be outside of the city like twice a month, I would be happy. So if I can be close to a park, I'm happy. I need that,
With that neighborhood, it's really awesome because you have Kalamegdan, beautiful, and you have the River Danube, all within, 10 minutes walking. But I found it a little bit like, after 2 years, I was sort of like, there's only a couple directions you can go from there.
Yeah, it's a bit limited, I guess.
You can walk up the hill to Knez Mihailova, or you can walk down Tsaradushana, and I just found it kind of limiting. So, but it's a great neighborhood as a first one to move in as a foreigner, because like you are in the center of Belgrade, but you also have this sort of village feeling to the place.
Yeah, and you're a bit further down, so it's not as loud and everything. And I'm noticing that people are opening up their small little businesses in that area. I mean, it does have a bit more of a, I guess, like an industrial hipster vibe, slightly. I would say that. Yeah. But that's too. I mean, I'm really interested to see what young people are doing here in sort of in the creative space. So I felt. I mean, there's different areas I want to check out. I want to be in Vračar more, Dorčol. I want to go down to Savamal. I mean, this is kind of the idea. I want to see what younger people are up to here.
Okay.
Like what their ideas are for business. And, like I've seen a couple interesting places, and this is kind of an idea that I've also like really been interested in developing, is things that are like merge in between a cafe and a coffee shop, and places that show films, and places that show like local design work and everything. And I really think those places I really gravitate towards, because you kind of have all of what you need in one spot. So I'm looking into finding more places like that in the city, and because I feel like, community is really at the heart of your experience anywhere. And so I think any place that brings people together beyond just for a coffee or a beer or alcohol, which are fun, there's great like nightlife here, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think we need more discussion. And the reason I do this channel in English is not just because it's my first language, but I think that people here are a lot more open in general to discuss things in English. I just find when speaking in Serbian, you get hit by this wall of Serbianness and this ingrained sort of hopelessness that's in the culture. But in English, people are always ready to explore new ideas. I find it's a very strange thing to me that Serbian people could be so different in one language or the other. It has to do with something to do with the perception of talking to foreigners and wanting to show their best, or it has something to do with the expressions, or even the tone of voice and the way that they're used to.
It's the way our brains function too as well. I mean, I noticed with myself that there's certain things, because I learned it as a child, that when I want to communicate, Serbian comes before English. That's usually when I'm a bit more emotional, or I have something that I feel like English doesn't really give me the benefit of.
That sort of thing, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like and also I think like I understand. I mean, I've lived in places in the world where really people have been affected by outside perception of them. So there's a bit of a chip on their shoulder, which is natural. But there's also that big desire to kind of transcend it. So it's a complex relationship. So I always understand people who might have that initial sort of reaction, and then they warm up after a while. It's pretty normal, I think. As for me, I don't know. I tend to switch back and forth between English and Serbian a lot, just because I miss being able to communicate, and it used to be a big part of my life. So
and communicating freely with people in either language is a very special skill to have.
To move between both. But also, I mean, for people who are just moving here and everything, I would say it's very accessible if you don't speak the language, which is great.
Which is a lot of people fall into that trap, though.
Yeah. Well, then you don't have incentive to learn. But, I mean, at least in the beginning, if you're walking around the street, you're not going to feel ostracized or that you won't be able to talk to someone.
There's
Everyone
a very
speaks English.
inclusive place, and that's part of the magic of Belgrade. It's a place where I think you can come from anywhere in the world here, and people will be more or less open to you as long as they like your vibe and what you're putting forward of yourself.
I mean, that's kind of the philosophy like I take in life now that I've learned. Is just really, it's sort of what you're feeling or getting from the person than all of the other things that you are seeing aesthetically or where they're from. And I think you should always trust that kind of feeling or intuition you have about people and stuff. So it's good to be in a place where that's a normal way to communicate and understand, because it sort of develops that instinct in you.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, well, welcome back. You said you wanted to pick my brain about a few things.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. No, I was just wondering more for like the different, for people moving here. Like you've obviously been here for a long time. Like you managed to stay, and a bit about you, how you've made that work for yourself, not only visa wise, but
I kind of decided years and years ago, 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to be here, or roughly in this part of the world, Central Eastern Europe for sure, with Belgrade being my first choice. And so I prioritized everything else in my life. The music that I make is related to this part of the world, and the history of this part of the world, and the feeling that I get from this city. And a lot of my friends became people here, and it was not really much of a sacrifice. The only thing is I lived for 3 years, half here and half in Canada, making money there and then spending it here. And essentially like having a split life. And that's when it really became really clear that I had to pick a side. I had to pick a place where I wanted to live, or at least a side of the ocean. And
something a bit more manageable.
It had to be Europe. The postmodern country that is Canada was not actually where I would grow anymore as a human being. It was great to grow up there, nice place to have a childhood, but it was not for me and what I wanted to become. So 10 years after that decision, 10 years after I decided that, I've also lived in the United Kingdom for more than a year, and what can I say? It's all very, I keep on loving this place. I've kind of exhausted a lot of my initial excitement for the place, but there's an enduring sort of long-term feeling that this is a really good place to live with good people. And since I started working on the internet, and most of my business is from the United Kingdom, working online, and I get paid there, I get the benefit of this sort of stable and fair business culture there, and get the money here. It's fine. Everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with my life here whatsoever. Lots of people do complain about a lot of things here. They have very valid points, but for me, it's just about deciding that you want to
picking a place and just putting your energy
and putting your roots down. I've done that for 5 years solid now.
I gotcha.
And it's just, you have to build on your life, and you have to constantly challenge yourself and not fall into a comfort zone, because that's a rut. For me, this YouTube channel is about going outside of my comfort zone a bit, approaching people on the street, asking them questions, doing interviews, having challenging confrontations on people in YouTube comments about, me being some sort of foreign imperialist who wants to, I wanted to originally move back to where my family was from, which is Bratislava, Slovakia, or Vienna, Austria, which is this flip side of my family history. The two cities are 60 kilometers apart, but those two places were far less interesting than Belgrade as a place to sit down. And the biggest thing I see here, in one word, potential. Potential, and any problem here is solvable. And any wall that you get in your life here, I think you can break through it. There's enough different stuff going on here, different cultural factors that you can kind of like push and make a world that's more for you than in other places. Other places, like I felt in Canada, people had already decided how they're going to live for the rest of their lives. So there was no point in trying to change anything. It was either sit there and try to make lots of money and, buy that house or whatever, or culturally,
you're obviously a person who's like interested in self-growth and self-awareness and challenging yourself, and you're challenging your own norms and everything.
And helping other people.
Helping
other people. Like, I see so many beautiful and talented people here who just have so much potential, and I want to help them.
I think like what I was saying before is that when you're making a decision to move here, move anywhere, it's always cognizant that it's even a luxury in of itself to have that choice. Most people don't even have the choice because of the way some people are born with one passport and the other, and I do think it's a luxury to be able to have that. And so I'm glad when you say things that they're opening up visas for many different countries to come here, because I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more of that like diversity and that churn. But also, like, I just want to ask you, how was it when you first came? And I've worked remotely. I did that a lot when I was, in different places in the world, and I didn't have an office to go to. So when it comes to social life, you really have to. Lebanon, thankfully, was a very easy place. It's a very small, like Beirut feels like a small city. Everyone kind of knows each other. But how was it trying to get to know people when you're working remotely and you have your YouTube channel and stuff?
It depends. Yeah, well, the YouTube channel is great for getting to know people. You just sent me an email, I invited you over here, and we're doing a chat now, and I'm sure this won't be the last time I see you in my life. And
that's true.
And working remotely can be isolating, to be honest. And so I'm doing my best to build a community of people here who are living a similar lifestyle, and we're all sort of in it together. And this, Belgrade's our host country, and we are guests, and we're interacting with the Western economy and drawing our income here as quote-unquote digital nomads. But at the same time, there's this feeling to set down roots here, and this is the perfect place to set down roots as a quote-unquote digital nomad or whatever, because I could be in a different city every week if I wanted to. I want to be here. I go lots of places. I'm going in a couple of weeks to Southeast Asia for 3 weeks just to sort of avoid the end of the winter and recharge myself so I can come back here and kick ass. But this is where I want to be. I want to see change here, and as long as I see a progression in my life here, and over the last 5 years, it's progressed really nicely here. So as long as I see a progression, as long as I feel that things are getting better, that more and more international stuff is happening, more and more interesting people coming here, and more people here sort of getting with the program of making their own destiny better and better, I'm really happy to stay here, and I feel like I'm sort of gravitating towards being some sort of leader of people who want to move here and want to come and make a future here. And even though nobody understands it except for those people who feel that calling, the locals don't understand it, people from your home country won't understand why you want to be here, but somehow there are we who understand, we who are gravitated to this city, to this place. We are a special sort of people who have this special sort of affinity for this thing in humanity that is very, very strong here. And it's very, very exciting to be in this place that just oozes this raw humanity and potential for just life being art.
Yeah. So what's the next step? Is the studio?
Yeah, the Belgrade Beat studio. Right now we're on a couch in my living room. The next one is to have professional microphones in front of us, the ability to have people Skyping in from different countries, a little more better lighting, all that stuff, and just broadcasting this message from Belgrade to the world, and just sort of feeding it all into this international thing. More events where we get together and have these discussions face to face with people who want to show up, coming and being involved in the scene, cooking for each other, music, and all this stuff. I want to create this movement of these international people in Belgrade who choose to live here because they believe in the place.
Amazing.
And it's people lots of people want to come back here. I get emails all the time from people who are Serbian, moved away, and want to come back. And my message is just do it. But I think it's not going to be easy to move here, especially if you're depending on the local economy. But it's going to be awesome. So,
well, I was happy to get to meet you then.
Well,
I feel like we share a lot of similar interests.
Yeah,
and I'm looking to do more similar events like that too, with people from Serbia and people from abroad, and sort of the mingling and sharing sort of either cooking and art and stuff. So
so let's keep in touch. Yeah. When I do the new studio, we'll do a follow-up to this.
Cool.
And it was nice to meet you because we some similar experiences and sort of interest in the place. And Katarina, thanks a lot. We're glad you're here. And we'll write how people can get in touch with you if they want to in the description here. So
sure.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye, guys.
And take care.
Belgrade Beat, the pulse of the city.
And we just talked for 40 minutes. Can you believe it?